Okay, friends. So today marks our first lesson in our new psychology theme, cognitive behavioral techniques. So today we're going into the introduction to cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. You'll hear me in this lesson refer to it as CBT quite often. And I'm really excited about this series. So week one, which is today, we're going to be going over the intro. Week two, we're going over cognitive disorders and how to reframe them. Week three, we're using CBT to overcome anxiety and depression. Really excited about that lesson. And week four, we're going into long-term application of CBT techniques. So how to apply it for long-term success, not only in trading, but in your life as a whole. Super excited for it. And let's jump into it, folks. If at any time I'm going too quickly, please let me know in the chat and I will slow down. Or if you want me to dive into a topic more in depth, I'd be happy to do that as well. So I broke today's lesson, the intro to CBT, into two parts: defining CBT and the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And part two is practical exercises for identifying and challenging negative thought patterns. That's really important. So if you're going to stick around for anything, definitely stick around for part two. So again, just jumping into it, folks. Defining CBT and connection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. So what is it and how it works and how does it affect us and our physical structures of our brain? So without further ado, I do want to say that my goal with these lessons is to provide you guys with concise information, with tools and protocols to improve your life. That's the whole goal here. So any feedback you guys have is much appreciated and encouraged. So cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBT is a form of psychotherapy that focuses on identifying and challenging negative thought patterns to change emotional responses and behaviors. So how does it work? The core principle of CBT is that thoughts influence feelings, which in turn influence your behavior. So by changing negative thoughts or distorted thoughts, you can alter emotional states and actions. So I know that seems, I don't know, maybe that came across surface level, but truly think about that. If you change the way you think, it will change not only your feelings, but how you act. And that can influence, let's dive a little deeper here. That can literally influence every single action, every part of your life as a whole, just by reframing how you think. And we have good science to back this stuff up now. I think it's been intuitive for many cultures for a long time, changing the way you think and meditation and how that can influence every aspect of your life. But I'm so excited about all the great data that's coming out in well-known scientific journals now about CBT and how people are using it to essentially cure chronic illnesses. And it's incredible, or at least help facilitate healing or diminish some symptoms like chronic pain. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to say that one more time. The core principle of CBT is that thoughts influence feelings, which in turn influence behavior. By changing negative or distorted thoughts, you can alter emotional states and actions, essentially alter everything you do in life. Pretty crazy. So for example, if someone thinks, "I always fail," it leads to the feeling of frustration or anxiety, which might result in avoiding new challenges. Which, like, think about that. Just the way you feel or the way you think leads to a feeling, which leads to an action, and those actions will lead to habits. And those habits will dictate how you do everything in your life. Again, this is like big stuff. How you think really does affect everything in your life, whether you know it or not. So I encourage you guys to bring that to a cognitive level. And but anyway, changing that thought from "I always fail" to "I can learn from mistakes" shifts the emotional response and encourages proactive behavior. And I know that sounds elementary and something that we might teach elementary students, literally toddlers, but it's also true for us. It doesn't, the way we think doesn't change. The structures of our brain, I should say, how we learn, how the neurons pass from one to another through neural pathways doesn't change. Sure, structures in your brain may mature and neuroplasticity becomes harder, but those connections are still there, and we still think the same way by firing of different chemical or electrical signals in our brain, resulting in chemical reactions going through our bloodstream, and so on and so forth. But I know that sounds elementary, but literally shifting from I always fail to I can learn from my mistakes can influence your entire life. And we're going to go into that. So quickly on neuroplasticity, and like I was talking about, what actually changes. So this is stuff gleaned from Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neurobiologist and scientist at Stanford School of Medicine, and he's also a ophthalmologist. So consistent use of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can lead to changes in the brain's neural pathways, promoting neuroplasticity, which we were just talking about, which allows the brain to rewire itself and improve emotional regulation over time. So if you are finding yourself, and we'll get into ANTs, automatic negative thoughts, in a moment. If you find yourself, and I'm sure some of us do, have habits of thought that are always negative, when some trigger comes up and someone cuts you off in traffic, or you walk in the door and you hear something you don't like, or whatever it might be for you, those automatic negative thoughts are really hard to challenge at first. But once you implement strategies, which we're going to talk about, once you implement strategies to become aware of those thoughts and then challenge them, it will become easier over time. So, and some of us, I don't know if he's in the chat as of today, but someone reached out to me and said, hey, how do I fix these negative thoughts? I feel so depressed all the time, and I am constantly trying to think better, but I feel like a fraud when I think happy thoughts, which is really unfortunate. It's a sad situation, but it's a reality of so many people. And I know I've been in that place before. And it does take time, just like anything, just like your trading career. To become consistent and good over time, it's gonna take time. And so all that to say is, if you start today trying to improve in becoming aware of those thoughts and moving forward with some of the techniques we're going to talk, you will find change, and it will shape your life in a beneficial way. So moving on. So it also, for a health standpoint, on a physically health standpoint, it helps reduce the stress response. So research shows that by challenging negative thought patterns, CBT can lower cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. We talk about cortisol quite often, reducing the physical symptoms of stress, such as tension, increased heart rate, and fatigue. We also know cortisol can lead to increased inflammation in the body, and we know inflammation is a precursor to almost every single disease that the human body comes in contact with. So essentially, how you think will literally affect your physical health. And we're not going to go too much in depth in this lesson, but in the lessons following, I'm going to pull from really, really cool clinical studies that have been done that show how effective CBT can be for chronic illnesses. It's so impressive how just your thoughts can change your physical health. So that's part one. Does anybody have questions about what CBT is, or how it works, or how it influences your life? Hey, what's up, brother? Much love to you as well. Sounds like everybody's on track. So again, I said it's going to be a quick lesson. We're already in part 2. So practical exercises for identifying and challenging negative thought patterns. So we're going to be going into identifying it, becoming aware of your negative thoughts, and then how to challenge those negative thoughts. So identifying negative thoughts. Start by becoming aware of automatic negative thoughts. Ants, we call them, or the scientific folks call them ants. Automatic negative thoughts. So start becoming aware of ants that arise during stressful situations. And you can write down these thoughts as they occur if you're a big journaler, or you always have a little notebook with you. But if not, I typically really do encourage journaling, but I don't journal on ANTs just because it's not convenient. And a lot of times my automatic negative thought responses will happen during traffic, or out in public. So it's just really inconvenient, to put it frankly, for me to, whip something out and write it down. So I encourage you guys, if you are in the same boat as me, when you have these automatic negative thoughts arise, just really start to focus. Be mindful of what that feels like and what emotions come with it. So be mindful of the trigger, be mindful of the feeling that you get after. So for example, for me, something that I am continuously working on, and I'm happy to say that I've been getting much, much better about it. When someone in traffic just does something where you're like, what are you doing? Are you even thinking right now? For me, a lot of times I'll have that automatic negative thought pop up in my head. Like, what the F is this dude doing? Makes me want to, the feeling that comes with it is frustration and anger sometimes. And through our other techniques that we know, grounding and mindfulness and breathing, really helps actually shift the nervous system on a biological level, shift from that fight or flight response to the rest and digest. You can relax, there's no more tension. You start to think, or start to feel better physically, but there's always those mental thoughts. So how do we help change that? We're going to get into that on how to challenge them, but just becoming aware of those is a first step. Just like anything in life, you're not going to be able to change it if you're not aware of it. So I highly encourage you guys, when something triggers you, and I know that's kind of a buzzword nowadays, but there's triggers in life. Like, that's just a thing. And so when something does trigger you, just be aware of it. That's a great start. And even if you're not able to control your emotions at the start, that's okay. We're going to work on that. So a practical tip for us: use a thought journal to record situations, the automatic negative thought, and the emotion tied to it. This helps you recognize recurring negative patterns. So I already covered that. I don't actually write down myself. If you want to, there are studies that show that writing down on pen and paper really does help. So maybe at the end of each day, you want to write down, like, hey, this was a trigger that happened. And maybe it's during trading. Maybe you can put it in your trading journal. Like, hey, I scaled in when I said I wasn't going to scale in, and the market, or maybe you're like, I'm following my plan and the market just flipped and it hit my stop loss in, 10 seconds. And maybe that triggers something to where you're like, seriously, like, after I do all this work and this and all of a sudden this happens. And that could bring a lot of emotions: frustration, anger, you could be upset, whatever it might be. Those are triggers, and it's important to become aware of those. So maybe just write them down in there. But if not, just having that mindfulness throughout the day of becoming aware in real time of those situations is really important. Don't want to beat the dead horse too much, but it's important to become aware, to say the least. So how do we challenge these negative thoughts? It could be really, really challenging at first. And someone already said it in the chat. I believe it was last week. Someone mentioned that, like, hey, I really feel like a fraud, because I think the conversation I was leading was along the lines of doing gratitude practices. So throughout the day, continually being grateful for things that you're given. And that's a really good CBT technique as well. But he said, like, hey, I feel like a fraud when I feel grateful for things, or I try to put a smile on my face. And again, it's a really sad situation, but it's a reality for a lot of us. So it's hard. And I'm not saying it's not going to be hard, but it is worth the fight. I promise you that. So for an exercise, once a negative thought is identified, so once you're aware of it, you're like, okay, someone just cut me off in traffic and now I feel this way, which I did not feel 10 seconds ago. So once you identify it, challenge its validity by asking questions like, is this beneficial for growth? And these aren't like little buzz phrases that I'm throwing out there. These are questions that when I was writing this down that I ask myself in real time during situations like this. Is this beneficial for growth? Can these thoughts help me or others? And are there better things to focus on right now? And especially that last phrase, or that last question, I should say. Are there better things to focus on right now? And the answer is always yes. I'm telling you right now, the answer is always yes. I'm not saying it's easy to ask yourself these questions, and it's not easy always to realize that you're having an emotional response to something that just happened. And I think and I was just having this conversation with a friend the other day. It's really, really easy to look at someone else and be like, man, you are freaking out right now about emotional response. I think we were talking about politics and how it's really sad nowadays how much lack of emotional control there is when getting into political conversations. And because it affects your life and there's lots of stuff. But again, just like all of our previous lessons, we talk about emotional control and mindfulness and understanding your own emotions. We went over an entire series on emotional intelligence and emotional control. And it's so, so important for having any sort of conversation in your life, especially these crucial conversations. It's so important. So it's, sorry, I got off topic a little bit there, but it's not easy to put away these emotions. It's really easy to point it out in someone else, but when your breath is shallow and you may not know it, but there's cortisol and epinephrine, norepinephrine running through your bloodstream, and your autonomic nervous system has literally shifted from rest and digest, kind of relaxing, to fight or flight. And it may not seem like that, but that's what's happening on a biological level. And everything's amped up, and it's really, you're in the moment, and you start to speak faster than you can think, and these emotions are really influencing your thoughts. This is where it is so important to become self-aware, to ground yourself. Like, okay, I can feel myself really not taking a deep breath right now. Just sat alone. If you could just do one thing, take a breath. Like, okay, hey, I'm sorry I got a little hot right there. This topic always gets me a little amped up. I truly do want to understand your perspective, and can we restart for a moment? And if you approach a conversation like that, you will almost always be welcome with a good response. If you're not, maybe that person's not ready in the moment, and maybe come back to it later. But anyway, okay, I'll just jump right back into the notes, folks. Hopefully that little tangent makes sense. It's easy to point out someone else's fault. It's hard when we're in the emotional state where everything shifts on a biological level and we're in the moment. We have to take the time to appreciate our emotions, say, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to ask myself some questions that can help me grow. And for example, I'll go over them one more time. So once a negative thought is identified, challenge its validity by asking questions like, is this beneficial for my personal growth? Can these thoughts help me or others? Or are there better things to focus on right now? And if you're able to ask yourself those questions, I promise you will start to see change. And those questions become easier to ask over time. Just like we talked about, research from Dr. Huberman, the consistent use of CBT can lead to changes in the brain's neural pathways, promoting neuroplasticity, which allows the brain to rewire itself and improve emotional regulation over time. It becomes easier, I promise, and it's worthwhile. So, moving on to a practical tip for challenging negative thoughts. Replace negative thoughts with more balanced or realistic ones. For example, I'll never get this right, to it's okay to struggle at first, I'll improve with practice. And I know that sounds elementary, but folks, if we're not doing that stuff, these negative thoughts are affecting your emotions. Those emotions are affecting your actions, and your actions form habits, and it will change your life. Literally, that there's no debating that. Your thoughts are truly influencing every aspect of your life. So if you want to lead a better life, the little things like changing a thought from I'll never get this right to it's okay to struggle at first, I'll improve with practice. Just that little thing will have tremendous benefits in the long run. It's not going to be easy at first. You may feel like a fraud, may not feel real, but fake it till you make it, folks. You will see change. The pathways in your brain will physically change, and it will lead to a myriad of benefits in your life as a whole, mentally and physically, and your relationships, which I would argue is probably the most important. So my closing statement is by defining cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and understanding how thoughts influence emotions and behavior, and using practical exercises to identify and challenge negative thought patterns, you can begin to shift negative thinking into more positive, productive mental habits. which leads to everything in life. Woo, how'd we do? You're still with me? That's all I got for you guys today, folks. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to open it up to Q&A. If you have any comments, concerns, whatever you got, let me know. But if not, you guys are released. I appreciate you guys being up here, or joining me today, I should say. Take a little sip, see if we got any questions before we end this thing. Got my little protein shake. Yeah, I dropped off my roommate at the airport last night. I think I got home around 2:30 or 3. I was a little tired this morning. Brandon, appreciate the kind words, man. Chris, yes, sir, absolutely. Yeah, I really do hope this stuff helps. Me just researching this stuff, it benefits my life. It's so interesting. Like, the more I learn and the more I understand how we have to have a holistic perspective when it comes to our being. And I know this sounds crazy to some of us with a more traditional thought process, but how you think influences your body on a physical level. And now we're able to prove that. How your spiritual well-being, your spiritual growth influences your mental health, your physical health. And you guys have probably heard me say it before, but I often think as us as a whole. You as a person, as a tripod, and the 3 legs of that tripod is your mental health, your physical health, and your spiritual health. So I encourage you guys to work on every aspect of that tripod every single day to strengthen them, to maybe rebuild one aspect. Maybe you are leaning pretty far to one side and you really need to start to strengthen one aspect of that. It's important stuff, guys. So it helps me. Hopefully it's helping you guys, and maybe it's just a reminder to start thinking more positively, because it will change your life. Truly, just the little things, guys. Just the little things. Excuse me. All right, folks. Well, I do appreciate you guys joining up, and hope you guys have a fantastic day. Go tell your loved ones that you love them. And I was wondering if anyone was ever going to clip that thumbnail for me. That's hilarious. All right, folks. I do love you, and go tell your loved ones that you love them. Go work out today. Even if it's just doing some air squats in your living room or doing some lunges or something. Go drink lots of water and get outside, enjoy nature, do the whole thing, folks. All right. Have a great day.